This is the new MG5, and while admittedly it doesn't look like much, it's actually an electric car underneath, and not only that, it's the only EV estate you can currently buy in the UK. And with prices starting at around £25,000, it's not going to break the bank either, particularly when you factor in the ultra low running costs. Now, today we're going to see what the MG5 is all about. But before we go any further, if you like what you see, why not give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more awesome car videos just like this one. There's a lot to like about the MG5, but admittedly, its looks aren't its strongest suit. Now, as you might know, MG is actually a Chinese company now. It was bought out by the Chinese mega company SAIC. And the MG5 is actually sold as the YesAuto i5 over in China, because allegedly when SAIC tried to buy MG, they couldn't get Rover, so they also launched their own brand that kind of sounds like Rover, and the badge looks a little bit like Rover as well. So although the MG5 is a new car in the UK, the YesAuto i5 has actually been around for a few years now. And one of the big giveaways that this is a Chinese market car is the massive grille. Massive grills are all the rage in China, and that's why you see a lot of car manufacturers going over to whopping big grills at the moment. Think BMW, well, pretty much mainly BMW. But what's quite funny on the MG5 is that because this is an electric car, it doesn't need any kind of cooling. So this massive grille up front is there purely for the aesthetics, even if it's a bit iffy. And because we're running on 16-inch wheels, the proportions of this car just don't look quite right. Now, even though this is a Chinese car, it actually reminds me of an Austin Montego estate, which is a very British and very rubbish car. Two things you can't say about the MG5. The back of the MG5 is pretty uninspiring. You've got quite an apologetic rear wing back here, but you do get this chrome strip that has a whiff of sophistication about it. But of course, the reason that you buy an MG5 is because it's an estate car. Now, a lot of electric cars today are either SUVs, which are really expensive, or super minis, which are more affordable, but, well, super minis. So the great thing about the MG5 is that back here you have 578 litres, which is really decent. Now, there are bigger petrol cars out there, like say at Leon Estate, and you can watch my review of that by clicking the link in the top right-hand corner. But 578 litres is still very decent for an EV in this price range. And you actually get a bit of underfloor storage as well if you want somewhere to tuck the cables away. Now, the big benefit as well of the MG5 is that it's built from the ground up to be an electric car, so the batteries are stowed underneath the passenger compartment, and that means it doesn't take up valuable space in the back of the car, hence why we get a very healthy boot space. There's no storage underneath the bonnet. We don't have a frunk or a fruit, but you do have this little indent in the cover here, which I guess you could use to store an instant pizza if you're really desperate for space. And while I'm under here, we might as well talk about the motors. There's one, and it's electric for obvious reasons. It's over the front axle, and it produces 156 horsepower. Now, that's actually paired up with two different batteries. There's an entry-level model, which is a 52.2 kilowatt-hour battery with a range of 214 miles, and a 61.1 kilowatt-hour battery with a claim range of 250. Not bad, bearing in mind that the MG5's rivals are usually more expensive, with worse ranges, and most of the time is smaller. Now, to charge this thing up, this actually utilizes 100 kilowatt charging. So if you find a suitable charger, which admittedly is very difficult to find in the UK, you can go from 0 to 80% battery in around 40 minutes. And it gets even better when you take pricing into account. So the MG5 is eligible for the government's plug-in car grant, which currently sits at £2,500. Although if you're watching this video many years into the future, the grant may have changed or could be scrapped altogether. But anyway, if you're watching this in 2021, it means that the MG5 with the grant included comes in at just over £25,000. And if you want to go for a long range, well, that's only £26,500. Now, you can actually get loads of new and nearly new deals on these over at YesAuto.co.uk, so you might be able to save even more money. I'm trying to find areas where MG has cut corners to bring the price of its car down, but I'm really struggling to find them because the quality of this interior is a lot better than its price tag would suggest. For instance, exclusive cars come with faux leather, and it's a really high quality faux leather too, and you get it on the seats, the dashboard, and also a bit on the doors. The steering wheel feels kind of sporty as well, with perforated faux leather hand grips and also a flat bottom. There's a mesh-like graphic on the dashboard which does its very best to jazz up the rather dull interior design. But on a more positive note, you get metal effect switchgear for the drive select and also the climate controls. There are some dodgy plastics in here, particularly down here in the center console and also on the dashboard, but then out of sight, and you're not really going to come into contact with them unless you're a car journalist and it's your job to start prodding around bits of the car. All cars get a small touchscreen infotainment system. It's not what you'd call high-tech and can be quite slow and chuggy at times, but you do get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto thrown in for free. There's also a part analog, part digital instrument cluster. Now, the digital screen does the job, but again, like the infotainment system, it can just be a little bit on the clunky side. One of the few gripes I do have is that you have heated seats in here, but there are two settings, which is off or absolute lava pit. Still, if you bear in mind the cost, it's a really well-equipped car. It's just let down by a bit of dodgy software, which admittedly you can get around by just loading up Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, which is what most people do as soon as they get in the car. Things are pretty good in the back, so I'm just under 6 foot. I've got the driver's seat in my position, and legroom not all that bad. I think if you were 6 foot and over, it might start to feel a little bit on the tight side. And the same thing goes for headroom. Again, not too bad, but if you were 6 foot and over, again, might start to feel a little bit tight. Now, the actual seating position can feel a little bit awkward, and we see this in actually quite a lot of electric cars. So you've got quite a high floor, which means that my knees are kind of up in the air a little bit. Now, a car like the VW ID.3, you can watch my review of that by clicking the link in the top right hand corner, has a more bucket-like design, so you sink into the rear seats, but you don't get that on the MG5. You do, however, get a pair of USB ports to charge up your phones, but only if you go for the exclusive car. The MG5 becomes even more of a head scratcher when you take it on the road, because in so many instances when you get really cheap cars, they can sometimes be quite nice on the inside, but it all falls apart once you turn a wheel. But the MG5 is actually really, really nice to drive. The thing that stands out to me the most is how quick it is. Like, 156 horsepower isn't all that much, particularly when it's in quite a big and heavy car, but the 5 just feels so rapid. I can put my foot down and pretty much at any speed between nothing and 60, you get a really, really quick throttle response. It just feels properly nippy. And if you're like me and you're a fan of Formula One and have been watching it for quite a long time, you'll get a real kick out of the KERS switch down here in the center console as well, which I assume stands for Kinetic Energy Recovery System, which is exactly what it meant in Formula One. But instead of getting a quick electric boost like you would do in an old F1 car, in here it changes the battery regen. So what that means is when you're driving along and lift off the accelerator, the car will gently apply the brakes to recoup some energy and put it back into the battery. Now, this has 3 modes. If you put it in 1, it just feels like a normal car, like you're coasting when you lift off the accelerator. 2 is a little bit more noticeable, and 3 is even more noticeable, but it doesn't quite have the shove that you get in some electric cars. In fact, I believe it was the Volvo XC40 P8 Recharge that had a really aggressive battery regen, and you can watch my video review of that by clicking the link in the top right hand corner. The steering is really good as well. It's not got that kind of airiness that you find in a lot of modern cars today, which are direct but really vague. There's actually a little bit, that's the lane departure warning system. It's got a little bit of weight to it, and also is pretty responsive. No, it's not performance focused. This isn't going to feel like a sporty car, but I feel like a good steering system like this just lets you drive the car with confidence. And the only kind of flaws I feel like I come across are more like little niggles. I kind of was talking about the heated seats earlier, which is kind of more of an on-off switch rather than something that you can adjust. And something that does wind me up a little bit is the semi-autonomous driving modes. So there is MG's own version of Tesla's autopilot that you can get, which has adaptive cruise control as well as a lane centering assist as well, which isn't too bad when you're on a motorway, but if you use it anywhere else, I feel like the steering can just get a little bit jittery, as if it doesn't really know what it's doing. And if you try and take over, the wheel goes really light and the car responds very quickly. So in all fairness, I would like it if it was just adaptive cruise control, but having that kind of semi-autonomous mode where they're all working together just doesn't feel quite right. And something else that really winds me up too is that when you're driving along, I like to have a digital readout of the speed in front of me, but when you activate the semi-autonomous driver mode, you'll then find that it will switch to the semi-autonomous menu when you're driving along, so you have to flick back to see what your digital readout is. And it's really frustrating because it means that every time you need to keep activating it, you've got to keep swiping back to the screen that you want to look at. I don't know why it can't just stay on the screen that I want. So if you look at the MG5 compared to other electric cars, no, it's not the best out there. The infotainment system isn't that good. And while the interior with this faux leather isn't bad, there are definitely better cars out there. And can we just talk about the design as well? Desirability has absolutely got to be a part of why you buy a car. And I think the MG5 has a face only a mother could love. But when you consider how much it costs, £25,000 if you want the entry-level battery and 26.5 if you want the long range, which I think is absolutely the car to go for, then it makes a lot of sense and it's really hard to knock it. So the MG5 is probably one of the big surprises of the year. Yes, it could do with a facelift quite urgently, really, but as a product, it's a huge bargain.